저는 박성원, 그리고 this is my fantastic colleague, Elliot Race. We are from Lee Smith. 오늘 이야기할 내용의 토픽은 세 가지입니다. 첫 번째로는 캘리포니아 주 정부에서 새로 나온 색소 및 다른 성분에 관한 법안, 식품업계에 있어서 굉장히 중요한 법안이고요. 그리고 두 번째로는 USDA에 새로 나오고 있는 Organic Regulation이고요. 그 다음에 세 번째로는 지금 현재 FSBP 관련해서 FDA의 Enforcement Trend입니다.
So one of the biggest changes in this past year has been the announcement of California's ban on a couple different food additives. As many of you know, California tends to be the fastest mover in the United States as far as food regulation, and most regulation honestly goes. The FDA regulates these types of things as well, but when it comes to actually removing substances, banning substances, changing things, California tends to move much faster, much more efficiently than the FDA does. And California's rule brings them a little bit more in line with the EU, a lot of other nations that we see that are more developed in this area. So, as usual, California is leading the way with these things. They've become the first United States to outlaw the use of these 4 food additives and drink additives in all foods. And there are several food additives that are going to be banned in the use of school lunches. How this is going to play out is a little bit murky still. It's not going to be implemented for quite a while, but we're working on kind of figuring out how they want to regulate the school lunch portion. Additives are common in a lot of different food products that are currently sold on the U.S. market nationally. So you've got a lot of news coverage about this ban. A lot of people are calling it the Skittle Law and like all kinds of things because they're common additives, common colors in things like Skittles, Cheetos, common snack foods that you'll see children eating, you'll see adults eating, everybody, beverages as well. And because this is a big change involving a lot of very popular products, we have a very long runway for implementation. That is going to prohibit all foods with these additives is Assembly Bill 418. It's going to prohibit red dye 3, brominated vegetable oil, potassium bromate, and propylparaben. And as I said, this applies to all foods, and these are ingredients that are already outlawed in some other jurisdictions in which these companies that use these products or use these additives are already operating. So we don't expect this to be a huge heavy lift for many companies who are making foods and manufacturing these things. They'll likely be taking their existing recipes from abroad and implementing them in their US production or implementing them in the production of products that are being imported into the United States. However, this is a change. So as you can see on the far right, that Bill 418 isn't going to become effective or enforced until January 1st, 2027. And that is intentional to allow kind of a soft landing for getting rid of product that is already in stock that has these additives in, and giving them time to kind of revamp and revisit any recipe changes or any supply chain changes that need to occur to effectively get their products in compliance with the new California law. Assembly Bill 2316 covers school lunches, school lunch food. So that is red dye 40, yellow dyes 5 and 6, blue dyes 1 and 2, and green dye 3. Notable that these are all food coloring additives, no oils, other things. And this only applies to school lunch foods. So not necessarily school lunch foods, meaning like foods you would market to a child to bring for their lunch, but rather school lunch foods that are sold by a school to children in their cafeteria. So the biggest regulatory implication here is for individuals or companies who are contracting with school districts or providing foods that are going to be served in cafeterias at schools that are public schools in the state of California are going to have to be in line with this bill. This bill has an even longer runway because it was implemented a little bit later. That one doesn't become effective until December 31st, 2027. So almost a full year after the red dye 3 and brominated vegetable oil ban. Again, we don't expect this to be too crazy of a change for a lot of companies. Many of these dyes are already things that are a little bit, they're avoided in foreign foods that are sold in the EU and other places. So as far as things that are imported, it'll likely just be kind of merging their recipe so that all products within all jurisdictions are using the same additives. This isn't anything new, but it's something that we still see to be a struggle for a lot of clients. It's something that the FDA is really paying a lot of attention to, and is something that is very important to make sure that you stay in compliance, that we're not ending up on an import alert or with any kind of 483 or warning letters. So what does FSBP require? Just as a base, importers have to verify that their foreign suppliers of food meet applicable FDA safety standards. So these include current good manufacturing practices. It's a long list of regulations, making sure that things are manufactured in accordance with U.S. safety, U.S. laws. Preventative controls for human food and animal food. So again, this applies to both food for people and food for pets, food for animals. So as far as pet treats, other things go, same deal. Making sure that we're handling these things appropriately, that suppliers abroad are handling these things appropriately, storing them appropriately, and keeping records of the way that they're handling these things so that the United States can guarantee that food entering the country is up to our standards. The produce safety rule. So again, making sure that when we're importing produce into the United States, it is handled accordingly, labeled accordingly, and making sure that we are best protecting the public from any communicable disease. And labeling requirements, including those for allergens. So again, a big focus of the FDA has been making sure that all foods entering the United States are labeled appropriately to combat, mislabeling of allergens, unknown allergens being present in foods, just as a public safety measure. There have been expansions in what labeling requirements are needed for allergens in foods, big allergens, major allergens. So it's been a big focus of the FDA as they monitor imports. So developing and following an FSBP plan is important. It's something that everybody who's importing is going to need to do. Again, this is probably not new to all of you, but it's something that's important to keep in mind as we continue to operate in this space. So importers have to designate a qualified individual. Qualified individual actually has a definition under the FDA regulations, so it's important to make sure we're picking somebody who meets the standards and qualifications that the FDA puts in place for these people. It's not a super high bar, but they need to at least be knowledgeable of what's required and able to assess these types of things for safety and compliance. The QI is responsible for most of the verification activities. These include on-site audits, evaluations of records, sampling and testing. All of these things need done at a fairly regular interval. So first, the QI is going to develop a hazard analysis and documentation plan and conduct supplier verification activities, meaning they will determine which foods require any kind of hazard analysis, any kind of special documentation to be in compliance with the regulations. And then they're going to go in and actually audit, request records, make sure that we're compliant as far as safety and verification of these things go. Identifying corrective actions is a big part. So if there is some kind of non-compliance, they need to document and verify that they've communicated these needed corrective actions to the supplier. So that the supplier can go in, fix these issues, and provide some kind of verification that they are now compliant or a plan for when they will be compliant to satisfy the FDA's mandate. And that. Most importantly, these things need reevaluated every so often. So the QI needs to reevaluate supplier approval and the supplier approval process at least every 3 years. So they need to go in and say, is what we're monitoring, is what we're looking at still up to date for what this supplier is doing, for what kind of products we're looking at and importing? Have things changed? Have their processes changed? Have they moved facilities? All of these things obviously are important to monitor. Anytime we have a change in any kind of process, procedure, array of products that are being handled, or even changes in US regulations, it's important to revisit the way that we're verifying and monitoring these suppliers to make sure that we maintain good compliance with FSBP regulations. The enforcement process, FDA has been pretty active in this space since it came into focus. So FDA inspects or audits importers subject to FSBP to ensure compliance. They identify potential non-compliance and will either issue warning letters, or they may even put people on import alert. In the event that FDA identifies certain minimal non-compliance, they may issue like an untitled letter or a warning letter, just with citations or just a notice saying, hey, you're out of compliance in this area. Please fix it. Come back to us when you fixed it. Let us know that things are looking good or what you've done. They may issue a more stern warning letter that says you need to come into compliance with these types of things or else we will take further action. And in more serious situations, they may actually put an importer on an import alert or a red list, in which they will be subject to potential detention or refusal at the border for certain products. Over the first year of enforcement, over 200 warning letters were issued due to FSBP non-compliance. So it was very busy that first year. It's continued to be very busy moving forward. And same thing with import alerts. 60 importers placed on the red list in the first year of enforcement. It's a very easy way for FDA to kind of get you in hot water and tie you up at the border and prevent products from coming.
Just quickly on this point, what we are starting to see is previously FDA enforcement, 이제 전에는 FDA enforcement가 아예 FSBP가 없는 회사들에게 포커스가 됐다면 지금은 사실 굉장히 많이 보이는 거는 이제 하나의 템플릿으로 그냥 엄청난 많은 에포트를 들이지 않고 적은 에포트만 들여서 굉장히 좀 cursory하게 만들어서 어떻게든 FDA 워닝 레터를 좀 줄여보려는 노력은 있는데 지금 생긴 이슈들은 사실 그렇게 deficient한 FSBP 관련해서 더 많이 생기고 있습니다. 이제는 거의 대부분 수입자나 뭐 제조사들이 어느 정도의 FSBP는 있고요. 예전처럼 뭐 200개 회사가 아예 FSBP가 없어 문제 생긴다기보다는 deficiency에 더 이제 초점이 맞춰질 것 같습니다. 그래서 만약에 식품을 수입하고 계시다면은 조금 더 지금 현재 가지고 계신 FSBP를 보완하시고 그리고 아까 여기에 얘기한 것처럼 every 3 years you have to review and update the supplier approval and the FSBP plans. So back to you.
Our final area we're going to talk about is the USDA's final rule for what they call strengthening organic enforcement. This is something that didn't really get a ton of actual press attention. It kind of actually came as a surprise to a few of our clients who came to us after implementation saying, we had no idea about this rule being a thing. Where did this come from? What do we need to do to get into compliance? And it's a bit dense. It's a little hard for people to understand, to approach. Some of the FAQ sheets are a little confusing for folks. It can be a little murky as far as which products it applies to. But overall, it's not too complex of a rule. It's just something that we need to think about moving forward as it broadens the scope of which entities need to certify if you're importing or handling or anything organic products. And when we're talking about this rule, the focus is on imported products that are edible is essentially what we're looking at. So if you're importing things that are organic textiles, organic, we had somebody who was importing organic like car wash fluid. Those kind of things are not impacted here. What we're focused on are things you can eat or your pet can eat or farm animals can eat. Anything edible is going to be subject to this rule and is going to need to be addressed. So implementation was in spring of 2024. It's currently being enforced, though we're not seeing a ton of action in this space, and it aims to create this sort of certification handshake across the border between a certified exporter and a certified importer. It broadly expands the entities required to maintain organic certification, and it explicitly focuses on importers and exporters of organic agricultural commodities, meaning anything edible. So if you are importing or exporting any of these products, you're likely now required to maintain an organic certification through the USDA in order to continue to claim that those products are organic within the United States or be subject to USDA penalties. There used to be a larger number of entities that were excluded from organic certification that could still be involved in the organic supply chain without necessarily impacting the ability of that product to be considered or labeled as organic. USDA has reduced the number of entities that are exempt from certification. And as I said, namely importers are on that list of entities that they say are absolutely not exempt any longer. So at this point, NOP import certificates are going to be required for all organic products entering the United States. We're going to have more oversight and traceability of these organic products. So the USDA is going to want to see documentation of organic certification for the exporting entity that is in charge of bringing that product to the to the border, and then the importer is also going to be required to be a USDA organic certified entity as well, and we'll need documentation of that supply chain continuity of certification. Frequency of inspections. We have not heard a whole lot about enforcement of this at this point. It does not seem to be something that is extremely active, but I wouldn't be surprised if it had an uptick moving forward. So there are required increases in the frequency of inspections from organic certifying agents, greater supply chain verification processes, meaning that your organic certifier is going to need to come to the site and actually inspect the operations on a much more regular basis. And we're going to need to have continued verification by those organic certifiers of the practices, procedures, and policies of other individuals involved in the supply chain and handling of these products. Along with the expansion of the non-exempt entities in this space, it now includes anybody who's handling, processing, or storing a lot of these products. There are some slim exemptions for very small entities, some exemptions for very specific retailers. But for the most part, if you're overall holding on to these products for a long time, or you're helping transport them long distances or in bulk, you're likely going to be subject to these rules and the certification requirement.
Just as a wrap up, if you have to remember anything today, the first thing is if you're manufacturing and exporting any products from Korea, check your ingredient list. You may need to reformulate starting in January 1st, 2027. Second, review and improve upon your FSBP plans. FDA enforcement is still ongoing. And then third, really important, organic regulations. 지금까지는 임포터가 certification 필요 없었는데 여기 계신 분들이 많이 임포터시죠? 그 임포터 분들에게도 certification requirement가 적용될 거예요. 근데 이거는 이제 오르게닉뿐만 아니라 식품뿐만도 아니고요. 뭐 제약, 의료기기 다 포함해서인데 FDA 규정이 점점 이렇게 중간 유통업자나 아니면은 so-called small guys들이 비즈니스하기에 점점 어려운 환경으로 사실 바뀌고 있어요. 그런 측면에서 규제가 점점 더 심해진다는 건 사실 안타까운 일이지만 어쨌든 현재 규제 환경이고요. 그리고 특히 이런 importer certification 같은 경우는 점점 더 신경을 쓰셔야 됩니다.
What we expect to be changed potentially is the means and frequency by which they are enforced. So the new administration could very much choose to either ramp up or ramp down enforcement of any of these regulations. We expect in some cases they may elect to ramp down these the enforcement of these regulations, or perhaps choose where to target these regulations. So we may see, a harder stance on imported goods from places where the United States has a more kind of combative relationship. We may see the new administration take a harsher stance on imported goods from places like China, where they've promised to be a little bit more aggressive. That may present opportunities for other places. You may see an uptick in demand for increased importation of goods from places like South Korea, places like Mexico, where we've had a pretty good relationship. And that may change the landscape overall. But overall, I don't expect the rules themselves to go anywhere. Just the way that they're enforced may change a bit. Thank you all very much.